Good morning. Good morning. Good morning, everybody. It is highly appropriate that we are here in Dover. I've been to Dover many times over the years, but in particular, in the spring of 2020, I came to Dover, went out into the English Channel, repeatedly filming the small dinghies crossing the English Channel. I asked a question: why are no mainstream media channels covering this subject? And I concluded that if you could cross the Channel with almost no chance of being deported, that you might as well put a sign on the White Cliffs of Dover saying, "Come on in, everybody welcome." And I predicted that there would be an invasion. Well, how dare I? Wash my mouth out with soap and water. But 195,000 people later, it is difficult to think that the word actually wasn't highly appropriate in every sense. I've even filmed people in the Channel on the 12-mile line throwing their iPhones and their passports into the English Channel so that they can't be traced. I've talked repeatedly about the national security threat that these people pose. But, you know, above all, what really upsets the British public is the total sense of unfairness. And that applies not just to those whose families have lived for many generations in Britain. It also applies to many who've come in the course of the last 50 years, legally, gone through the process and moved on to settled status and British citizenship. And it is that sense of unfairness that has made this an issue where there is overwhelming public support for stopping the boats. But what do we get? We get failed Rwanda schemes. We get judges in Strasbourg stopping aeroplanes taking off. And actually, we've had every single Prime Minister since David Cameron saying very clearly, if you come into this country illegally, you will be removed. None of them have meant it. Most farcical of all, of course, is the current Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, with his smash the gangs concept, which of course has been a total failure. And now under his premiership, more people across the Channel than under any other Prime Minister. So, Zia Yusuf today, this is his first major outing as our shadow Home Secretary. We'll talk about that. But there is a deeper issue, and that is legal migration. Something that we had basically been living with throughout the late 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, and all through that period of over half a century. Net migration into Britain averaged about 30,000 people a year. The Labour government decided to open the doors, all in the name of diversity. And the Conservatives, especially under Boris Johnson, with the Boris wave, opened up the doors unconditionally, in a way that no longer could the argument be made that immigration was good for the economy. Since Boris Johnson became Prime Minister, it is very clearly bad for the economy, and goodness knows what the long-term cost of the Boris wave is going to be. Some independent experts reckon it could be as high as £200 billion. And let's be clear, nobody in Britain has ever voted for a government that promised mass migration into our country. Nobody has ever been asked about this issue. And I thought Matthew Said in the Sunday Times yesterday summed up his trip to Gorton and Denton very, very well when he talked about balkanised Britain, meeting women in the market who had little or no understanding even of the English language, despite having lived in this country for a long time. So rather than diversity, actually what we've got in many of our towns and cities is division. Deep inbuilt cultural division, and a growing sense amongst huge numbers of British people that something is going horribly wrong. Unless we are able to provide a proper democratic antidote to this, then I fear that we will see a rise of a really worrying, dangerous form of extreme right ethno-nationalism. And I think we're beginning, over the last couple of weeks already, to see some specimens of it. Nobody over the last quarter of a century has done more to defeat the genuine, intolerant, abhorrent, extreme far right than me. We did it with the British National Party and we'll do it with whoever else follows. But it's important we get a grip on this because there is no issue other than legal and illegal immigration that has broken the bond of trust between the voters and those that govern us more than this issue. And I have spoken out consistently on it for now nearly 25 years. But I repeat the point I made at the conference last week. This is no longer a one-man band. Not that it ever was, with all you lovely people. And the biggest membership of any party in the country. But I will leave the rest of this debate and the solutions we're offering to Zia. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nigel, and good morning, ladies and gentlemen. At the heart of any civilized nation lies a social contract, a simple understanding that binds people together. You get up early, you work, you pay your taxes, you play by the rules, you raise your children to know right from wrong, and you obey the law. In return, the state owes you something basic and non-negotiable, a country that still exists, borders that mean something, streets that are safe, a home that is recognisably yours. If the state cannot guarantee that, then it has broken its contract with its own people. But just look at what the legacy parties have done to Britain. Take a look at our streets, our towns, our cities. Our borders have been left open and undefended. Knife stalks entire neighbourhoods. English girls were raped on an industrial scale while those in authority looked the other way. Tens of thousands of men have arrived on our shores and been given hospitality at the taxpayers' expense. Ladies and gentlemen, that social contract has not merely been broken, it has been shattered. As Home Secretary, my priority will be simple. The British people come first. Their safety, their prosperity, their future. That is what guides Nigel Farage. It's what guides me and our party. Every decision we take, every law we enforce, every policy we fight for flows from one simple principle. Put Britain and its people above all else. I will be relentless and unflinching in pursuit of this objective. Look, I'm the son of immigrants myself. My parents came here in the early 1980s. And when they did, they had to travel where the work was. My mother frequently told me how welcoming the people of Britain have been to them. They went from Cardiff to Cornwall to Bells Hill, where I was born, to Cambridge, to London. My childhood memories are punctuated with stories of the warmth, the generosity and open hearts shown to my parents. This country has given me every opportunity. It gave me a tremendous education, the opportunity to start, build and sell a successful business. I'm eternally grateful. And that's why I'm in politics. I love my country. And it's why, as Home Secretary, I will not allow the generosity of the great British people to be taken advantage of. My parents have given decades of service to the NHS, so I know well the huge contribution migrants have made and can make to this country. But when my parents came to this country, the levels of legal immigration were what illegal migration levels are today. For years, the Tory Labour Uni Party has looked the other way while the very fabric of our society has been under attack. We've been told to accept open borders, that a country that spends £60 billion a year on defence should stand powerless as men arrive in small boats day after day. That we should shrug as our streets change, knife crime rises, and the traditions and culture of Britain are steadily and heartbreakingly eroded. Well, I say to you today, those things are not inevitable. They are the deliberate choices of weak men and women who lack the courage, lack the spine, and lack the moral clarity to defend the country they were elected to serve. Well, here's the thing. I do not accept this. Nigel Farage does not accept this. You know what? The great British people do not accept this. And we will end it. The Tories promised in 4 consecutive manifestos to cut net migration. They said that they'd bring it down to the tens of thousands. They left office with that number at almost 1 million. In some, they imported 6 million net new people over their 14 years. And they left the country with fewer hospital beds and just 482 additional prison places. Is it any wonder the British people struggle to get a GP appointment, why tens of thousands have to wait 24 hours or more for a bed in accident and emergency? Or why people feel so unsafe and criminals are released early? The population explosion has brought British public services to the brink of collapse. But ladies and gentlemen, this only scratches the surface of the Tory betrayal. Because we can't just look at stats. We must look at the human costs. We must look at the faces of the victims. We must look at the lives forever altered by a system that prizes the rights of foreign criminals over the safety and rights of the British people. Consider the heartbreaking case of a 12-year-old girl called Amy. Mohammed Ibrahim, a man who had no right to be in this country, a man who was driving while disqualified, struck little Amy in a devastating hit and run. He did not stop his car. He did not rush to her side. He didn't call for help. He left a 12-year-old girl dying under the wheels of his car, and he fled like a coward. Hours after that horrific crash, Amy's grief-stricken father had to make the decision that no parent should ever have to make. He had to give the order to turn off his own daughter's life support machine. You would think that the immediate consequence for the man who did this would be the heaviest sentence the law allows, followed by the immediate deportation from the United Kingdom. That's what any reasonable person would assume. But that's not what happened. The most senior judges of the Immigration and Asylum Tribunal stepped in. They looked at the case of a man who killed a British child, and they prevented her killer from being deported. They cited Article 8 of the European Convention on Human Rights. They cited his right to a family life. Following that ruling, Amy's father gave a statement to the BBC. And in my humble opinion, his words should be inscribed on the walls of the Home Office. You work hard, you play by the rules, you pay your taxes, and this is how you get treated. What does that say about politicians, our leaders, and the legal system? It's a joke. How can he say he's deprived of his right to a family life? The only person deprived of a family life is me. Amy was my only family. They are obsessed with the rights of others, from Pakistan, Afghanistan, and Iraq. Where are my human rights? Where indeed? Well, that was in the year 2010. 2010. The Conservative Party had just begun their 14 years in power. They promised to deal with this. In fact, David Cameron wrote personally to Amy's father to say that he would. And yet here we are. 15 years on, 15 years of betrayal. Since that terrible day, many more British citizens have been killed, have been raped, and they have been robbed by people who broke into this country illegally. The fact that the United Kingdom has still not even left the ECHR is to the eternal shame of the political class. Well, I promise you this. When Nigel Farage becomes our Prime Minister, gone will be the days when your rights are trampled in the service of foreign citizens. Never again will British people be second-class citizens in their own country. Under a reformed government, His Majesty's Parliament will be sovereign once again, and the rights of the great British people will reign supreme. This system is so broken, so morally bankrupt, that committing serious violent crimes can actually improve a foreign national's likelihood of being granted asylum. I want to repeat that. Committing brutal crimes can make it easier for illegal migrants to stay in Britain. There are countless examples. A Zimbabwean paedophile, a man jailed for over 5 years for unspeakable child sex offences. Was he removed and sent home? No, he was allowed to stay because judges cited Article 3 of the ECHR. They argued he would face hostility in his home country. We saw an Albanian drug lord jailed for running an illicit cannabis factory avoid deportation after judges ruled under Article 8 that kicking him out would deprive his daughter of a male role model. Think about the moral sickness of that decision. A convicted, organised drug kingpin held up as an essential, protected role model by British judges. A Ugandan gang member who clubbed a man to death in the back of an ambulance. A man who received a life sentence for murder successfully won the right to stay in Britain to protect his mental health. His lawyer successfully used Article 3 of the ECHR to argue it would be inhumane to send him back to a country with poorer mental health facilities than our NHS. He barbarically took a life, and the British taxpayer is now forced to cater for his mental wellness. How can anyone hear all this and argue that Britain is not broken? How many more people must die at the hands of those who should never have been in our country in the first place? How many more victims' families must be devastated in this way when their rights are placed beneath those of criminals? The answer is none. Vote reform, we will leave the ECHR and end this madness. And a reform government led by Nigel Farage will also confront the truth, plainly and without apology. Our country is being invaded. Now, I know many in the establishment gasp at that word. They may well clutch their pearls in the television studios. But the dictionary definition of invasion is an incursion by a large number of people in an unwanted way. Almost 200,000 people have broken into our country across the English Channel over the last 8 years, more than stormed the beaches of Normandy on D-Day. Make no mistake, as Home Secretary, I will end and indeed reverse this invasion, because the patience of the British people is now exhausted. We're unwilling to accept that Britain's borders should be open and undefended, unwilling to accept that Britain must surrender its sovereignty to foreign courts. And yes, this is a national emergency. That's why, upon winning the next election, a reform government will launch an emergency programme to track down, detain and deport all illegal migrants in the United Kingdom. Operation Restoring Justice will be the most transformative policy of our lifetimes. Now, some have already called our plan draconian. Our response? Britain is being invaded. Hundreds of thousands of men continue to arrive on our beaches illegally. Our plan is the only appropriate response to a national security emergency. It will immediately stop the boats by sending a clear message that being in our country illegally now has an ironclad consequence: immediate detention and removal. Deportation is the ultimate deterrent. As Prime Minister, Nigel Farage will direct every instrument of state to ensure illegal migrants are removed from this country. We will pass the Illegal Migration Mass Deportation Act. And the draftsmen who worked on this legislation were given a clear instruction that when Nigel is Prime Minister, there will not be a judge in the country that will be able to prevent flights from leaving. We will leave the ECHR. We will create a legal obligation for the Home Secretary to deport all those in this country illegally and disapply all international treaties that are used to keep illegal migrants in this country. And we will pass a law that makes clear that if you come to this country illegally, you will never be granted asylum. End of story. We will create a new agency, UK Deportation Command, which will have just one mission: to track down and detain those in this country illegally. We will rapidly build detention capacity. No chance of bail, no chance of absconding. Detention will mean deportation. We will embark on the most audacious charter flight operation since World War II, ramping deportation flights to 5 departures every single day. And to guarantee success, His Majesty's Royal Air Force will keep a Voyager aircraft on standby as a hot spare. So even if a plane has mechanical issues, flights will not be stopped. Deportations will not be delayed. Return agreements will be secured. Countries of origin will take back their nationals. And ladies and gentlemen, if a country refuses, we will stop issuing visas to that country. And today I can announce that based on overstaying rates and illegal boat arrivals, we will freeze the issuance of visas for countries including Pakistan, Somalia, Eritrea, Syria, Afghanistan and Sudan. We will not consider lifting these bans until they comply and take back their citizens who are in our country illegally. Because borders are not simply lines drawn on a map. They define a country. They are the perimeter of our national economy, the boundaries of our security, and the guardians of our culture. And right now we are standing on the precipice of a fiscal disaster. A disaster that Boris Johnson, Priti Patel and the entire Tory party quietly slid under their chairs, hoping you wouldn't notice. It's a ticking time bomb that will cost the British taxpayer hundreds of billions of pounds unless it is diffused. It's become known as the Boris wave. You see, Boris Johnson threw open our borders and imported over 3 million migrants in 3 years. The vast majority from non-EU countries. And astonishingly, 2.9 million came in on non-work visas. They were allowed into this country against the wishes and without the consent of the British people. Many were about to be eligible for indefinite leave to remain. Many do not work and never will. The granting of ILR means they will gain lifetime access to our welfare state, a lifetime of living off the British taxpayer. This will cost hundreds of billions of pounds, and that's why the Boris wave must be averted. Make no mistake, a reform government will avert the Boris wave. Reform will do what's hard, but also what is necessary for national survival. We'll abolish indefinite leave to remain and replace it with a renewable 5-year work visa and dedicated spouse visa. Salary thresholds will be higher. There will be a proper test of English language proficiency. And I want to be clear because our opponents will try to twist our words. We're not here to separate British families. Spouses of British citizens will always have a dedicated, protected spousal visa available to them. But our expectation of migrants in Britain is simple. We expect you to more than pay your way, to contribute to our economy, to speak English, and to not commit crime. There will be a special temporary worker programme to aid adjustment for lower paid workers in national critical industries such as care. But for every one of those visas issued, a commensurate training place will be created for a British worker, because that's how Britain weans itself off this addiction to cheap foreign labour. And look, having built and run a successful business myself, I know that people respond to incentives. For too long, witless politicians have created an incentive for people to come to Britain and take advantage of the goodwill of the lovely British people. That's why Nigel talked about Britain now being a food bank for the world. British taxpayer funds should be spent exclusively for the benefit of British people. The British welfare state should be available exclusively for the British people. And ladies and gentlemen, it's a slap in the face to every working man and woman in this country. The British taxpayers have been forced to spend £15 billion on universal credit welfare payments to foreign households in the last 18 months alone. Think of the state-of-the-art hospitals that money could build, the thousands of police officers it could put on our streets, the tax cuts it could deliver to struggling British families. We will stop this hemorrhage of national wealth. A reformed government will terminate welfare payments to foreign nationals. But in our hearts, we know this is not just about economics. It's about the very soul and character of our nation. For centuries, Britain has proudly been a high-trust culture. British people looked out for their neighbours. They respected the law, not out of fear, but out of a shared sense of civic duty. But as untold numbers of people from low-trust cultures with entirely different values have been imported into our country, that precious, fragile trust, it's breaking down. Look at the indignities we now have to face. The police have had to resort to pleading with illegal migrants to respect women in this country. Northamptonshire Police recently had to give a presentation to illegal migrants, who were sitting comfortably, by the way, in a taxpayer-funded hotel, having to explain to grown men that women have equal rights to men in Britain. The presentation implored the illegal migrants to only walk on the pavement and warned them that human rights exist in this country. This is all available online. They had to inform them that committing crimes might affect their asylum applications. Might affect their asylum application. The fact that this is deemed necessary is a national outrage. It tragically encapsulates the stupidity of allowing people into this country whose core values are fundamentally, and yes, sometimes violently, at odds with ours. Reform values the traditions that built this nation. And we will never apologize for our history. We will defend our culture, because a nation without a culture is not a nation at all. It's just an economic zone. A shopping mall with a flag waiting to be exploited. That's why we will protect the Christian heritage of Britain. We will end the incendiary practice of converting churches into mosques or places of worship for any other faith. I'm proud to announce that a reform government will immediately grant listed status to all churches and create a new statutory use category for Christian places of worship to ensure these historic pillars of our communities can never be converted into places of worship for any other faith. Putting British people first means making British people feel safe. Safe in their homes, safe walking our streets, safe commuting to work, safe playing with their children in the park. But right now, they simply do not. Ladies and gentlemen, last year, 4.5 million crimes were committed against victims in this country. 94% of them resulted in no charge. 4.2 million crimes were committed in Britain last year where the perpetrators were not even charged. Is it any wonder British people don't feel safe? Knife crime across England and Wales has grown dramatically over the last decade. Is it any wonder British people do not feel safe? As your Home Secretary, I will overhaul our police force. The police will be relieved of any work, any initiative, any mandate that does not directly detect crime, investigate crime, and arrest criminals. Our police are good, brave men and women who put themselves in harm's way to keep us safe. But they've been distracted and drowned in bureaucracy by a political class much more interested in looking virtuous than keeping British people safe. Under reform, they will spend their time detecting crime, investigating crime, and arresting criminals. No more dancing on social media, no more painting police cars with pride or trans flags, no more policing legal speech on the internet, no more DEI coordinators draining budgets. As Home Secretary, I will ensure our brave police officers have a laser focus on their duty. You may ask what that means. I'll tell you what it means. It means that we will make sure police officers are recognised, rewarded and promoted solely for conducting thorough investigations and making arrests that lead to a charge and a conviction. We will set and drive a rigorous performance framework focused entirely on hard results. Because, by the way, we know that's what frontline officers want. It's why they joined the force in the first place. And it is exactly what the public desperately needs to feel safe again. We will get the knives off our streets by giving the police vastly expanded powers of stop and search, up to and including saturation in high crime areas. If you choose to carry a deadly weapon in Britain, you will be stopped, you will be searched, you will be arrested, and you will go to jail. Now, the Tories' record on prisons is one of catastrophic, frankly generational failure. The population explosion they inflicted on the British people means violent criminals are wandering the streets today because there's simply no place to put them. Judges are letting criminals walk free because our cells are full. And I want to give you a statistic that perfectly illustrates the staggering incompetence of the modern political class. In the years between 1842 and 1877, Victorian Britain, an era of horses, carts and candlelight, they opened 90 prisons and added 22,000 prison places, 32 of which remain operational today. In the 14 years of Conservative rule from 2010 to 24, an era of advanced engineering and hypersonic missiles, they oversaw net immigration of 6 million people, and they had managed to add 482 net new prison places. It's a betrayal on a scale that's frankly hard to comprehend. Reform will build prison capacity with great speed. We will use emergency powers and we will build the facilities we need, because a lack of prison places means nobody can feel safe. Finally, and perhaps most importantly, as Home Secretary, I will confront the real and growing threat of Islamist extremism that has been allowed to take root here in Britain. It's been tolerated for too long. Tolerated out of fear of being called names. It's a national scandal that Jewish people are being harassed on our streets and even on our public transport. As Home Secretary, I will not mince words. And I will not flinch in the face of progressive outrage. We won't make the same mistake as David Cameron, even when he had a report on his desk as Prime Minister, stating that the Muslim Brotherhood was deliberately incubating Hamas. He still failed to prescribe it. Well, as Home Secretary, I will immediately prescribe the Muslim Brotherhood and the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps as a terrorist organisation, along with any other organisation that promotes extremism in Britain. And I want to be clear. If you come to this country to upend our legal system or to do us harm, you will not be welcome here. I will overhaul the Prevent Counter-Terror Programme. As the devastating independent report by Sir William Shawcross highlighted, Prevent is unfit for purpose. It's become a bloated bureaucratic exercise in diversity training and social work, rather than a focused instrument of national security. He even said, and this is a direct quote from his independent report, he said it has a, quote, institutional hesitancy to tackle Islamist extremism over fears of being labelled Islamophobic. That is an astonishing indictment of an organisation charged with preventing terrorism, given 3/4 of MI5's caseload is Islamist terrorism. Under my leadership, Prevent will be laser focused on one thing: detecting extremists before they can kill British people. It will be focused on the actual threats to this country. As such, 3/4 of Prevent's resources will be deployed to identify and neutralise Islamist extremism in direct proportion to MI5's caseload. Now look, we've seen recently devastating, blood-curdling, tragic cases where known extremists were referred to Prevent multiple times by different authorities, and yet somehow they slipped through the fingers of the state and went on to commit horrific atrocities against the British people. Axel Rudakabana, the monster responsible for the horrific Southport attack in 2024, he was referred 3 times to Prevent. Take Khairi Saadallah, the terrorist who committed the brutal Forbury Garden stabbings in 2020, killing 3 men and seriously wounding 3 others. He had been referred to Prevent 4 times. Ladies and gentlemen, this cannot continue, and a reform government will ensure that it does not. So as Home Secretary, I will implement a new structure to zone in on corroborated threats. If anyone is referred to Prevent from 3 separate corroborating authorities, they will automatically be subject to a thorough physical search of their homes. When the police did search Rudakabana's home after the attack, the police found ricin, knives, and an Al-Qaeda manual. Had this common sense policy been in place at the time of the Rudakabana referrals, there's every chance that those beautiful, innocent girls would still be alive today. Ladies and gentlemen, the hour is late. The damage done to our great country by open borders and a succession of cowardly Tory and Labour governments is profound. The scars on our country are real. But I promise you, they are not irreversible. We can and will secure our borders and end the invasion. We will rebuild the high-trust society we once took for granted. We will take back our streets from the gangs and the prolific offenders. And we will revive the ultimate sovereignty of our parliament. We'll discard the foreign laws that protect the wicked at the expense of the innocent. We'll do all of this, but it requires a fundamental seismic shift in how we are governed. It requires a government that wakes up every single morning with just one thought and one thought only, burning in their minds: putting the British people first. And so my promise is this: we will make you, the British people, feel safe. Safe in your homes, safe walking your streets, safe going to work, safe playing with your children in the park. We will bring back justice to a system that in many cases has forgotten the meaning of the word. We will bring back order to streets that have surrendered to chaos. We'll secure our borders and protect and defend our culture. Together, united under Nigel Farage's leadership, we will make Britain safe, proud, prosperous and powerful. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Zia, thank you very much indeed. I think the overwhelming common sense majority in this country want our borders protected, want safer streets, and I've no doubt that you'll be met with howls of indignation from those that have led us into this mess in the first place. Right, let us take our press questions. We have a large number, probably on a wide range of subjects, other than the one we discussed today. Let us begin with Catherine Forster from GB News.
Thank you, Catherine Forster, GB News. You're making very big pledges. If you get a majority, how quickly would people see changes? Weeks, months, years? Because, of course, you're going to have to hire a lot of people, you're going to have to spend a lot of money. Most importantly, you're going to have to repeal and change a lot of laws. Thank you.
It's a really good point. And I want to be crystal clear. Everything I just talked about, not only will it not be easy, it's going to be ridiculously hard. If it was easy, it would already have been done. But we've also not had political leadership. And I know this because I've spoken to former Tory ministers, some of whom are now in our party, thankfully, who will tell me that unless you have a Prime Minister who is willing to stand up for these things and fight for them tooth and nail, and unless you have cabinet colleagues who are also willing to fight for these things tooth and nail, and unless you have all of your legislation pretty much that you're going to need in your first year ready to go by the time of the general election, you basically stand no chance of success. And I actually take a different view to this idea that British people have this sense that Britain is completely changed overnight if reform wins. That's not what I hear when I talk to voters. What they want to see are people who are going to stand up for the things that are important to British people. And so, to answer your question directly, there are some things we can do very quickly. Serving notice that we're going to leave the ECHR, can do that pretty much straight away. Yes, there's a notice period. Yes, there's a raft of legislation we're going to need to amend, and we'll be ready to do that in our first year. Danny Kruger's doing invaluable work in terms of our preparation for government. Why? Because we know we're going to face... Look, I hope everyone in the Home Office is going to want to work with me if we win. But that's not my expectation. I will be prepared. I'll be prepared for whatever they're going to throw at me.
There, I'd have thought.
So listen, we've got to be real about my assumption. I hope I'm wrong, but every non-elected institution in this country will work through every day and every night to try to stop what Nigel's trying to do, what I'm trying to do, and everyone else in the Reform Cabinet will try to do. We'll be ready for that. So, look, things will start to change pretty quickly. Will we be able to solve every problem that I've talked about in my speech today in our first year? Of course not. But as human beings, we're much more sensitive to trajectory and velocity than we are to absolute position. And I think what people will see very, very quickly, if Nigel's our next Prime Minister, and that's the decision British people deliver, they will start to see it's morning again in the United Kingdom.
Very good, thank you. Yes, bold and ambitious, and what really Zia is talking about is a change of direction by 180 degrees. And people saying something, but actually meaning it. Rather than telling the electorate, once every 4 or 5 years, what they think they want to hear. Moving on, Harry Farley, BBC News.
Thank you, Mr Farage. Harry Farley from BBC News. Mr Yusuf, you spoke about the quite extensive measures that you want to take, UK Deportations Command, the Voyager on standby, and building thousands more spaces for detention. Can you explain how that would be paid for? I know your party have previously spoken about the savings that you think it would generate in the long run, but in the short term, there would be a cost. Can you explain how that would be paid for? And secondly, I was interested in your point about wanting to protect Britain's Christian heritage and preventing churches from being converted into places of worship for other faiths. Presumably, this isn't about having lots of empty, historic and expensive buildings. Presumably, you think Britain's cultural heritage would be better protected if people went to those churches?
Yeah, so to go through those, in terms of how we pay for it, look, the good news about our mass deportation plan, you'd be hard-pressed to find something more valuable to the fiscal health of the United Kingdom than deporting people who are here illegally. The cost of... I know it sounds like a political punchline, as Nigel said when he was asked this question before. So how can we afford not to? The cost of just accommodation, a fraction of Border Force's cost, and some of the councils obligations with regards to illegal migrants and asylum seekers is already north of 7 billion quid a year. And that's before all of the other costs that are clearly inflicted on the British taxpayer that the government just hides. Which, by the way, is going to be great fun publishing all of those numbers in our first few weeks. So look, if you look at the realities of the technology that's available today, it's possible to stand up 3,000 illegal migrant detention beds in the space of 8 days. I mean, that's what America did, for example. And there are some things that we would not obviously emulate from the American approach to mass deportation, but that is absolutely technology that is available to us. Well, what's been lacking is the political will. I totally reject all of this nonsense that these things are simply not possible. So this would be fiscally positive to the United Kingdom within our first term of government. In terms of the point about preserving Christian heritage, look, it is beyond the scope of a Home Secretary or a Prime Minister or any elected official to tell British people what religion they should follow or whether they should follow a religion. This is about Britain's Christian heritage. Look, I'm not Christian, but I went to a Christian school. I can see that so much of what makes Britain such a great country is associated and, irrevocably derived from Britain's Christian heritage. And by the way, I think that's a very popular view. I hear that all the time from people. And so the idea that churches should be converted into mosque or any other place of worship, I think that's incendiary, and I think it cuts to the heart of what it means to protect our culture. So I'm not going to stand here and tell people, whether they should believe in God or which God they should believe in or go to church. I might have my own personal views, but ultimately as a legislator, we've got to focus on Britain's cultural heritage, because as I said in my speech, a country that doesn't have a culture is just an economic zone.
Quite right. Yeah, and this isn't just about churches. Actually, you'll be hearing more of this from Suella Braverman. It is actually about teaching people as they grow up about the Judeo-Christian culture upon which everything in our civilization was built. Yeah. And so it starts at school and it goes through. I'm minded to say, mind you, more people might go to church had we had rather better archbishops of Canterbury over the last few years. Last chap, goodness gracious me. Right, now Sarah Saunders from ITV News. Sorry.
Hello there, thank you. You've spoken about your plans for a deterrent quite clearly, but could I ask what measures and how far you would go for those boats that do continue to cross the channel?
Yeah, so two things. Number one, we're going to surveil the hell out of our maritime borders, for sure. That's the first thing. And this technology already exists. Right, again, what's lacking is the political will. That's number one. Number two, every single person who attempts that journey to arrive in our country illegally will be detained and will be deported. And no one's going to convince me that if we do that, that those boats are going to still come. They will stop coming. Who on earth would pay if you have a 100% certainty of being detected and deported? And again, the technology has existed for years to be able to do that. So look, am I open to, and this would obviously be for a future reform Minister of Defence to determine with Nigel, but are we open to using the Navy for these operations? Absolutely. But here's the fundamental point. If every single person who tries to come to this country illegally is detained and deported, they will stop coming. And that is a contrast, by the way, to what happens currently. They get a complimentary ferry service from halfway across the channel by Border Force. They get free taxis, free, in many cases, 4-star hotel accommodation with a swimming pool, free TV via a free TV licence. You all have to pay for your TV licence. Free healthcare, free meals, free activities. I mean, I could go on. So once you change the incentives, human beings respond to incentives. Those boats will stop coming.
Yes, and there is a precedent for it. Australia had exactly the same problem. The boats were slightly bigger. They were coming from further away, namely Indonesia. And the Australian government's tried everything. Prime Minister after Prime Minister said, we're going to stop the boats. And, of course, they didn't. Until in 2012, Tony Abbott made it absolutely clear. One, you come via this route, you will never, ever, ever be granted refugee status. And two, do you know what he did? He towed the boats back to Indonesia. And guess what? Within 2 weeks, they've stopped coming. And I have warned Jordan Bardella, who is the bookie's favourite, to be the next French president, that after £800 million of British taxpayers' money has been given to the French government to stop these boats from leaving, that if necessary, we'll get the Royal Marines to tow the boats back to the French beaches. And he gulped hard. But then, later on that day, in an interview with the Daily Telegraph, said he accepted that situation, he accepted that is what we would do. Charles Hymas, Daily Telegraph.
You talk about on knife crime about extending the powers of stop and search. In what way precisely would you remove the need for them to have reasonable suspicion of possessing a weapon? And then secondly, obviously one of the big things this week, we're probably going to get the bill on jury trials and the idea of scaling back, halving the number of jury trials. Does the party have a view on where you stand on that issue?
Yeah, so on knife crime, so the first point to make is that stop and search works. As the Americans call it, stop and frisk. You can see what happened in New York. It was astonishingly successful. In frankly, a much more difficult environment than the one that we have in Britain. It worked there. It works in places like Japan, where people are routinely stopped and searched, and their knife crime issue is virtually non-existent. So there are laws that always exist in this country that allow senior police officers to make a decision that this is an area which we're concerned about, where that we have some intelligence, we're going to go and make. We're going to go and use stop and search here, but they're allowed to do that for 24 hours, extendable by another 24 hours. So the precise thing we are announcing today is that we will expand that to 30 days. Now we're going to couple that with, of course, leaving the ECHR. We've already talked about repealing the Equality Act and replacing it with something much more fit for purpose. So all of the other tools that are otherwise used, frankly, to intimidate police officers into not doing the obvious thing will no longer be available to them. And the test of that is that something like the Notting Hill Carnival, where people are stabbed, countless people or hundreds of people are arrested, that's exactly the kind of scenario where police officers will be able to use their operational discretion to move in on intelligence in a specific area to use stop and search. I want to say one other thing about this too, because the primary reason for what I can tell from all the reading I've done why stop and search is not used in this country is because officers, politicians, anyone who talks about using it, even though it obviously works, is that they're racist. Because the people that would be disproportionately stopped by the police would be ethnic minorities, right? Frankly, that is true. That's what all the data, I looked at the data, that is true. But here's what they never tell you. The blood that soaks the streets as a result of those deadly weapons is invariably of those same ethnic minorities.
Yeah.
And if you speak to, as I did, for example, a Somali mother whose son thankfully survived but was attacked with a machete, would she rather her son be mildly inconvenienced by a very respectful, law-abiding police officer through stop and search to avoid ever receiving a knock on the door from that same police officer, giving her the news that no mother should ever receive? Yeah, you bet she would.
I was in court. I was in court in November, not as a defendant. No.
Thanks for clarifying.
It has happened before, but it's very interesting. I was told get there at 10 o'clock. This is at Southwark Court. Get there at 10 o'clock for a 10:30 start. So I, dutifully got there at 10 o'clock for a 10:30 start. To be told by my barrister, well, it may not start at 10:30. It might not start till 12:30 or maybe even 1 o'clock. I said, well, surely that can't be right. There's a backlog, isn't there? Massive backlog. Yeah, but it all depends what time the defendant gets delivered to the court, and often they're several hours late. So I don't think abolishing something that served us pretty well for 800 years, just because we haven't actually got these courts up and running. And frankly, if the backlog is that great, run them 24 hours a day. Give them Christmas Day off, perhaps. Let's get through the backlog that way, rather than surrendering ancient rights and liberties. And frankly, in Starmer's Britain, the idea of one of his mates as a judge making a decision on whether somebody in this room has said something on Facebook that they consider to be hate speech, and as a result of which they can get a judicial sentence, no thank you very much indeed. Michael Knowles, Daily Express. Big front page in the Express today.
Thank you very much. Do the Royal Navy and Border Force have the legal protections that they need to be able to engage in pushbacks? Because there's a lot of concern on the French side about safety at sea legislation. Thank you.
If you look at international law, I'm going to have a go at this one a bit, because I'm quite a seafarer, although I didn't quite make the journey the other day to the Chagos Islands that I wanted to. But I did get jolly close. Yeah, under the international law of the sea, you know, what you do with people in distress is to take them back to the nearest, safest port. And frankly, if you're literally on the boundary line between here and Calais, we would have absolutely every right to take boats back to Calais, that being the nearest and safest place. So there's no difficulty with any of this. And funny enough, there was a boat the other week that left Zeebrugge with some illegal stowaways on board, and it got almost all the way to Harwich. They discovered the stowaways, and do you know what they did? They took them back to Zeebrugge. You know, it's not actually that difficult. But you have to have the will, you have to have the resolve, and you have to remove the barriers to all of this. And I mean, nobody in this room, nobody in this party is going to tell you that the post-1945 settlement with the European Court of Human Rights wasn't done with the very best of intentions at the time, with a world that had been through the most horrendous place. But you know what? We're over 3/4 of a century on. It is now out of date, inappropriate, and through judicial activism, frankly, has lost its original sense of purpose. Zia, do you want to add to that?
No, I mean, I completely agree. But the only thing I would add is, look, we're also going to repeal, we're going to leave the ECHR. We're going to derogate from a whole host of international treaties. We're going to repeal the Equality Act and replace it. We're going to repeal the Human Rights Act and replace it with something that is fit for purpose. All of these things, if you actually speak to people on operational duty, in our Navy, in our Army, in the police, they will tell you that these are the things that loom over them. And these are just ordinary men and women, brave people who are trying to do their jobs. So we're going to have their backs. We're going to sort the legislation out inside our first year. You'll hear a lot more about that too. But they're also going to hear it from, if we win, me as Home Secretary, Nigel as Prime Minister, we will have their backs.
It's a very, very big programme. And to answer the question that was asked earlier, none of this can happen overnight. What the country wants to see is a change of direction and a genuine, honest resolve to deliver promises. And that's what really, really, I think, does matter. And it goes right back, really, to the early sentences that Zia uttered earlier on about the social contract between the governors and the governed. Martina Bett from The Sun.
Thank you very much. You say you want to protect Britain's Christian heritage, and you mentioned schools as well. Italy protects its Christian heritage by keeping Islamic schools small and tightly regulated. Would you want Britain to adopt an Italian-style model? And quickly, on the burqa ban, at the weekend, Suella Braverman said that she would support one. Could you clarify what reform, if there is reform policy? Thank you.
Yeah, so look, let me address the burqa one straight away, because that's probably where there's been a huge amount of misinformation, so I wanted to be clear about that. I personally support a ban on all face coverings in public. Right, so that's actually a piece of legislation that has multiple bonuses to it, because it's going to aid integration. It's also going to help people feel safe. That's what I talked about. You know, if it's happened to me, I'm sure it's happened to a lot of you. If you're walking down a pavement and there's someone walking the opposite direction to you at dusk, and they are wearing a hoodie and a balaclava, or worse actually, you know, those things with just the eye, I don't know what those called, you generally cross the road, right? So, and in this era of massive, you know, we have the CCTV per capita in London would have a good shot up against any city in the world, and yet the people who are able to opt out of that surveillance, ridiculously, are the people who wear those face coverings. So I support that personally. We'll have more to say about that in terms of formal policy in due course.
Yeah, face coverings worry me. I was at an event in Newcastle the other day, and a mob turned up. Not the people I was having lunch with, but the mob turned up in the streets, and it was all really pretty ugly. And in the end, they got violent and started smashing windows, and goodness knows what else. And they were all wearing face masks, Antifa face masks. And we've seen this pattern of behaviour again and again and again. Makes it difficult, virtually impossible, for for the police to identify them, and I believe that is wrong. And you might have seen there was a murder, a political murder, in a street in Lyon that took place last week. I don't want us going down that road. I think face coverings in public are problematic for many, many reasons, not just religious ones.
And on schools?
Sorry?
Islamic schools?
Well, look, I mean, if a headmaster stood up and urged sixth formers to go out and commit violent acts, I suspect they would be arrested within 12 hours. Similarly, if a Church of England vicar, was to advocate violence or extremism, we would act immediately. There is clearly a concern what goes on within closed communities, within schools, or within churches of other faiths, and we would be negligent not to have an understanding of what that is. And that, I think, is what the Italians try to do and probably get right. Claire Ellicott, Daily Mail.
Thank you. Mr. Yusuf, there's been no mention of the Rwanda plan today. Do you plan to revive that, and would you be happy to pay the £50 million that Rwanda has asked for? And just quickly on deportation and increasing detention centres, would they be built in the UK or abroad? And Mr. Farage, do you think the UK should retaliate against Donald Trump's tariffs? Thank you.
Okay, so on the Rwanda plan, and would we pay Rwanda compensation? Absolutely not. No chance of that whatsoever. So let's clear that up. Number two, would we look at potential options in third countries? Yes, frankly. And I get it. This is the problem with the whole third country thing is the Tories, as always, they completely screwed everything up, paid an insane amount of money. Even at the point when it was obvious they were going to lose the next general election, they still did it. And importantly, they never took even remotely the legislative steps to give that programme the slightest chances of actually succeeding. As Robert, who's here in the front row, would tell you, there's absolutely no chance that thing had any chance of success, even if they'd stayed in power, because they didn't even leave the ECHR, which is a necessary, albeit insufficient, precondition to success. So we will look at third countries for a small minority, but there's plenty of space in areas that are where very few people live, as a result of this modern technology that's been used in America and in other countries with regards to modular detention capacity, and that's where we'll build it.
We got our retaliation in first, didn't we? We told the American president last week that he could not use bases that were British territory for an attack on just about the most evil, theocratic, ghastly regime in the world of Iran. We've got our retaliation in all right. And in fact, I think if much more of Starmer, I shudder to think what our defence relationship with America will be going on from here. People constantly say that Trump threatens the NATO alliance. Well, the truth is, over the last decade, he's actually made the NATO alliance stronger. Yes, they may be bullying tactics, but he's made people pay up and make big promises. Even the Germans now are talking about massive increases in spending. But if you say to your American allies that they can't use bases such as whether it's Fairford or who knows, maybe even Diego Garcia, and if at the same time you hand over the sovereignty of Diego Garcia, America's most important strategic military base in the world outside of their mainland, and you put it under Mauritian sovereignty and you trust them to honour the terms of the agreement, when effectively you're turning the Indian Ocean then from something that has been stable since 1945 into literally a big geostrategic battleground between India and China. And you can see those signs already. We're not in a great place. Look, Trump's tariff policy is going to hurt us. We know that. We also know that with good relationships and good negotiations, we can get our way around that. But I really, genuinely worry. I genuinely worry, especially from a defence perspective, about what Starmer is doing to our relationship with the Americans. Because frankly, we may not like everything they say and do, but frankly, without them, we are currently defenceless. James Hill, The Spectator.
Zia, as Shadow Home Secretary, could you just set out reforms policy on two areas of law and order? The first, would you look at potentially reintroducing capital punishment? And the second, as a party with a kind of libertarian tradition, would you strengthen, liberalise or retain Britain's drug laws?
Yeah, so On capital punishment, there's nothing on the agenda right now with regards to changes to that. You know, Nigel has made clear that is a matter of conscience for MPs. I personally agree with that. Nigel, I don't know your view on.
Oh yeah, I mean, look, you know, I mean, I'm not. When I was very young, I was in favour of it. I now, given the number of deep, long-term injustices that have been revealed over the course of the last few years, I could never ever support it. But I do feel strongly that on issues like this, on issues like abortion, that these very much should be individual matters of conscience as opposed to party policy. I feel that quite strongly. Drugs?
Yeah, look, I will say what we're against. We're against primary school children being taught how to take, quote, drugs safely.
Just vote Green, it's easier, you know. I mean,
We're against, you know, Britain turning into the world's biggest crack den. We're against, by the way, this is like official green policy. You know, we're in this age now where people are so desensitised to stuff that just appears on social media and all that. But this is literally official green policy. They want to legalise crack cocaine. They want to legalise heroin. No, we are dead against those things. And I would also say this, to the degree the drug laws apply, we need to make sure that they're actually enforced. But there is a battle right now in British politics around this issue because the Greens are polling, you know, way higher for comfort than most people would like. And we're seeing this in Gorton and Denton. We're seeing in some cases very otherwise socially conservative voters potentially being lured into voting for a party that would literally legalise crack cocaine, heroin, and teach very, very young children how to, quote, take drugs safely. That we are against.
yeah, I mean, James, I've changed very few of my opinions over 30 years, but I mean, this is one area where I'm on the record going back a quarter of a century for saying that I would really love to know, you know, in Basel, in Portugal, where they decriminalised drugs, what actually is the effect of this? You know, has it cut crime? Has it led to fewer deaths? I've never ever found a proper answer to that question. So I've always kind of thought in my own mind that the war against drugs, which we've heard about from repeated Home Secretaries, was being lost year on year on year. But I have kind of changed my view a bit. I mean, I can see now the habitual use of what we call cannabis. And what we call cannabis actually is up to 20 times stronger than what, you know, the Beatles were taking back in the late 1960s. And I can actually see, and I bet there's almost every one of us in this room will have a friend in a family where a teenager has been psychologically altered by habitual use of a drug that they thought was soft and Class C and not dangerous. So I think my views on this have really hardened quite considerably. But look, you know, education, of course, is the key to all of these things. David Maddox, The Independent.
Thank you very much. Mr. Yusuf, first of all, you mentioned Cardiff in your speech. You'll be aware it's one of a number of sanctuary cities in this country. And you'll also be aware that Labour and the Lib Dems in particular are likening your deportation command to ICE. Are you prepared to see showdowns in places like Cardiff and Sheffield, like we've seen in Minnesota, in America, if people resist your policies, if you're in power? And Mr. Farage, you mentioned how you've taken on the far right in British politics and how your party's taken on the far right. Should your by-election candidate in Gorton and Denton distanced himself more quickly from the endorsement from Tommy Robinson?
So with regards to Cardiff, obviously look, Wales has this insane nation of sanctuary policy, which cuts to the heart of some of the themes of my speech, which is that, you know, the people who are citizens, who have paid their taxes their entire lives, who've grown up in this land, being subordinated, their rights being subordinated to foreign nationals, and not to foreshadow too much a Welsh manifesto that might come out. You may well make an educated guess about Reform's position on nation of sanctuary. I want to make the point, though, you know, I know it's very tempting and somewhat inevitable that people are going to make a comparison between, you know, what we're proposing, UK Deportation Command, and ICE in America. Look, I've spent a lot of time in America, and look, there are more firearms in America than humans. And there are many problems in this country, but thankfully, We don't have that problem. I don't envy anyone who has to do that job of law enforcement in America, where that is true. So many people, particularly criminals, are carrying firearms. So, this notion that we're going to have the same issues that have come sharply into focus internationally as a result of Trump's ICE program, it's just not true. Like, we would not expect UK Deportation Command to need to carry weapons. It's not going to be the case. But I also want to be clear that if you're in this country illegally, they will detect you, and they will detain you, and they'll deport you, right? So, policing is much more done through, I would say, consent in this country than it is in America, as someone who's lived there. So I think we need to be nuanced about this. If your question is, are we going to have the kind of situation that we saw in Minnesota, in Britain, as a result of our deportation program? No. If your question is, do we have the resolve to stand up to progressive outrage against perfectly legitimate enforcement of the law in this country, then the answer is we will never flinch in the face of that.
I'll be in Cardiff next Thursday. I'll launch the Welsh Manifesto next Thursday. I hate leaks. But I can give you a sneak preview that if we win the Welsh Parliament elections, Cardiff will no longer continue to be a city of sanctuary. All right? Keep it very and on the question about Matt Goodwin and the by-election, what people out there always try to provoke a reaction. And if you fight back at something, you deny something, all you do is give the whole story a bucket load more oxygen. And if Goodwin had done, as you sort of hinted and suggested in your question, then we would have read a lot more about it over the course of the last few weeks. We just let it go by. And sometimes not engaging in a fight is actually the right thing to do. Thank you. Anna Heater from the Press Association.
Thank you. Under your UK deportation command, you said there would be up to 288,000 people deported a year. How have you come up with that target? And how also will this command be any different from Border Force's remit and what they're already doing? Thanks.
Yeah, so I want to be crystal clear. That 288,000 number is a function of the detention capacity that we will create. Right, so I've spent a lot of time with my team looking at countries that have successfully embarked on and delivered mass deportation programs. Actually, it was President Obama, of all people, that became known as the deporter-in-chief, because he actually deported millions of people across his 2 terms, many of whom were actually enforced deportations. That's not something you hear very much, but it's absolutely true. So what the detention capability, so we're talking about 24,000 detention beds being built in a very short period of time. So that would mean an incremental 20,000 from the current capacity that already exists. That will give us the capacity to do that. Look, we're going to deport hundreds of thousands of people across our first term. Can I give you the exact number now? Can Nigel give you No, that would be silly, because it's going to depend, obviously, to some degree on how quickly, in particular, we're going to be able to pass the legislation and get that team staffed. But number one, if you're in this country illegally, you should not expect to stay. You will be deported. And number two, this program will be the biggest mass deportation program in this country's history.
Samuel from Politico.
Hi, thank you. I'm interested in the issue that you see with churches. It seems that the Church of England actually bars churches that are sold from being turned into worship sites. So can you give any examples, or how many kind of churches you've seen do this happen to you? And will you also block churches being sold to be turned into housing? Because that seems to happen probably a lot more regularly.
Yeah, so number one, churches have been turned into places of worship of other faiths. I can send you a list of 41 straight away. Wow. Might not sound like a very big number, but those are confirmed numbers. There are many, many more going through planning permission at the moment. So that's just not true that it's in any way legally prohibited. And sometimes people go, well, it isn't thousands, so why are you passing legislation? Which, again, is just like this sense of learned helplessness. The whole point of passing legislation is to prevent a really bad thing from happening. And based on the correspondence I get from local residents, many of whom are not even practicing Christians, by the way, they are very, very concerned and in some cases disturbed about that. And I think that I totally understand it, which is why we're proposing this. And then, I get that, inevitably you're going to ask, oh, well, what if they turn it into a nightclub or something like that? And, look, if you're a legislator and you're trying to pass legislation, you've got to draw the line somewhere. I think the thing that is really incendiary, that really upsets people, because we're not here to moralize on people, is turning churches, in some cases buildings have been churches for hundreds of years, into places of worship for other faiths. There's just no need for it. It's deeply incendiary, and it cuts right, I think, into the heart of the cultural heritage of this country.
Yeah. Getting there, two more. Tom from Politics Home.
Thank you. You talked about relieving the police from DEI mandates. What will be the consequences for individual forces if they go against this and continue to hire on the basis of diversity?
Yeah, so that's a really interesting question, because people always go to what's a punishment? And when I say people respond to incentives, there's two parts of an incentive, right? There's a carrot and the stick. And so much of what we see with regards to, again, I want to be really clear. Our police are brave men and women putting themselves in harm's way, doing an insanely difficult job in this day and age where everyone's got a smartphone in their face. The moment they're actually doing anything and they have contact with the public, they have smartphones in their face, right? And obviously there was this footage of this remarkably brave and eloquent woman who, and we've all seen it, and my highest respect and commendation to her. So it's a very difficult job. But we've also seen the footage of police dancing and police painted police cars and in pride flags and things. And if you vote for a reform government, that stuff will end. And I want to be clear: we will ensure that police are recognised, rewarded, and indeed promoted based simply on their ability to detect crime, to investigate crime, and to arrest criminals. If you do that, then that statistic I gave you earlier, which is that 9 out of 10 offences last year saw no charge, that will change very quickly.
Yeah, I think she should get a medal, Zia. I thought she was absolutely amazing. She was calm, she was rational. Wow, that took some real strong inner moral courage to stand up and do that. No, it was absolutely extraordinary. Last question, Dave Burke.
Hiya, thank you very much. You've spoken a lot today about Christian values. When Reform unveiled its deportation plans last year, the Archbishop of York, who at the time was the most senior Church of England bishop, described them as beneath us as a nation. The Bishop of Oxford wrote an open letter to Mr Farage saying what he heard no compassion in what he heard. Senior bishops have also called for the two-child benefits cap to be scrapped. Is it misleading, perhaps hypocritical, to be going around the country talking about Christian values when senior Christians who spend their life studying the Bible are uneasy with your policies?
You've just explained beautifully. You've just encapsulated so beautifully, I couldn't have done it myself, why the Church of England's gone to the dogs. Absolutely.
So is it then...
All right. Sorry, did you have one more question?
Yeah, so just going on from that, so is it then that a lot of the bishops, particularly those in the House of Lords, don't understand Christianity as well as you do?
I think they've got a rather twisted view of what their flock in this country actually want them to do. And we are completely open to genuine refugees. They must have their head in the sands, these bishops, if they cannot see that aggressive young males chucking their iPhones and passports into the English Channel at the 12-mile line so we can't find out who they are. If they don't understand that that is a threat to our country, then frankly, they're not doing a very good job. Thank you, everybody.